right, everyone. Welcome to our new podcast called No Girls Allowed in the Locker Room. I'm joined with three of my closest friends who all just happen to be sports anchors in Nashville. Ladies, let's just talk about why we wanted to put this show together and call it No Girls Allowed.
Yeah, whose idea was that anyways? I feel like we were just having a couple conversations at practice and then someone said, oh, that'd be great for a podcast.
Seriously, I think we kind of became friends here just through the media. We see each other all the time throughout the week, and then we casually were like, well, let's have a happy hour because we all deserve a drink a time or two. And then that kind of filtered into, well, why don't we just talk about it on a podcast, because we talk about so much when we see each other. So it's been great.
I think it was important to have the word girls in there in some capacity, because we always get called like that sports girl, or the sports girl at Channel 4, or the sports girl on the radio or at Fox, right? So I think we all kind of bonded over that. And No Girls Allowed, of course, is like, you know, a little nod to, I'm sure, something we've all experienced, whether it was in a sport or a locker room or whatever the case may have been, joking or not.
And I think it's also rare to have, we had at one point 4 women in the market covering sports. That doesn't even, in the same market covering sports for Nashville, that doesn't even include Queen T, Teresa Walker, the queen of AP, Associated Press, for the state of Tennessee. So I think, you know, it is rare, and we acknowledge that how special it was to be able to have other women doing what we do, going through what we go through on a regular basis. Because you look at a lot of markets, top markets across the country, no women, maybe one woman in that market covering sports. It's not always the case.
Yeah, I'll say really quick to that too, by the way, because I'll admit it, I'm the oldest in this podcast, which is embarrassing to admit how old I am. But I will say, with experience, you know, being in markets where I was the only girl for so many years covering sports, and not having somebody to maybe lean on or understand what I was going through, this has been a breath of fresh air in this Nashville market for the past 8 years I've been here. But especially since you guys have arrived in the market, it's just been like actual night and day from some of the experiences in the past. So girl power, it's a real thing. And I just feel like if we can support each other, like, it just elevates all of our work.
Well, thank you all for coming on. Let's just jump right in to the hot topics of the day. Davante Adams has been traded to the New York Jets. Lauren, let's start with you. What was your reaction to this?
Oh, man. Well, I mean, it's no secret I'm from the Boston area, so I've seen the Jets toiling away in mediocrity for a long time in my lifetime, right? So I think that the franchise is really desperate to get something going, and where, again, like, totally aside from like growing up a Patriots fan, I think all of our fandom like gets diluted doing this job, but the Pats just ran the table for so long. The Bills have shown that while they should be the kingpin of the division, Miami has given them a run. They are a mortal team, that's for sure. And so I think the Jets are like, hey, like it's time to strike. And I don't know if Aaron Rodgers pulled like a, you know, LeBron James GM.
He did.
Type of, you know what, like Aaron Rod GM type of thing instead of lay GM. Like, I feel a bit misled by the Edgar Allan Poe, Davante Adams post, somewhat implying a move to Baltimore, and like the literary nerd in me was like, wow, this would be so cool if like this is what he's going to go do. But I think at the end of the day, it was always going to be the Jets, and this was just a matter of time. And I'm sure it didn't help losing on Monday Night Football and the way they lost, in terms of feeling like they absolutely needed to make some kind of move and change, and frankly keep Aaron Rodgers happy. So I don't know if this is going to be the move that takes the Jets to any type of promised land and what they're envisioning, but it sure makes things interesting.
It ain't. Okay, so these are the conditions. So they're going to get a conditional 3rd round pick. The Raiders will get a conditional 3rd round pick. But if Davante Adams becomes any of these, that can become a second round pick. So if he has to be a first or second team All AP Pro, and then on the active roster for the AFC Championship game or the Super Bowl. So I think that's going to be a third round pick. I don't think that he's going to get any of those. Jill, let's jump in here.
To piggyback on what Lauren was talking about in terms of Aaron Rodgers' fingerprints, there was a celebrity golf tournament this summer, and Aaron Rodgers, whether he was joking, I don't think he was joking at all. I think he was talking about his former teammate, Davante Adams, and he said, yeah, man, I love that guy. Can't wait to play with him again. Like, come on. Like, this is very much a quarterback that has a lot of pull, a lot of say. Go back last week to the Robert Saleh firing. Like, I mean, I know a lot of people, including myself, were shocked about that. I'm sure there are a lot of people inside that facility that were shocked about that. A lot of NFL media, writers that cover the team on a regular basis. It came, no one really saw that coming. That, to me, smells a little fishy when you have someone as big and as commanding as Aaron Rodgers, right? And so I think this whole Jets situation is interesting. Listen, if Rodgers thinks that they're going to play better with Davante Adams, great, cool. Then you make the moves you need to make in order to play better and win more games. So it's business, right? I think it's interesting how maybe we could have picked up the breadcrumbs a lot earlier than just this week, just this month. So very, very interesting.
Yeah. Kayla?
I mean, let's call it like what it is. It's a dysfunctional organization. There's nothing more to say about it. I mean, this is an organization, and, Woody Johnson, whether he was listening to his friend Aaron Rodgers in terms of firing Robert Saleh and bringing over, Davante Adams, mind you, all the other guys he's brought over, Alan Lazard, last year was Randall Cobb. I mean, whatever Rodgers has asked for, Woody Johnson has been like, yeah, there you go. Do with it what you may. And we've still not seen the fruits of the labor by any means, guys. And whether it be bringing in a first round draft pick and a quarterback in Sam Darnold or Zach Wilson, those didn't work out. Then you bring in a future Hall of Famer. This isn't really panned out, even with all his friends and family that are coming along for the ride. It just... It keeps on, to me, going back to this is a dysfunctional organization, just like the Dallas Cowboys are. They can't get over the hump. Their owner is in the way. So you can see, maybe the product could be coming into its own on the field, but then there's something else that's going on behind the scenes that separates these guys when it comes to getting the job done. They have a phenomenal defense. They have those pieces. The offense clearly has a lot going for it. It's got a run game. And we saw Breece Hall last night. He's able to run the ball when they give it an opportunity. But now you're giving play calling opportunity to Todd Downing when he has clearly failed in the past. We all know that here with the Tennessee Titans. It might be good for the first half where it's on script, but then they go off script, and here we are back to where we all believe that this Jets team is. It's going to be dysfunctional when it's all said and done.
And they obviously have not prioritized the offensive line. You're getting all of these guys that he wants, but he has no protection. So what does it even do?
Yeah, they brought over, and paid guys that were veteran offensive linemen that it's better from last year for sure. I mean, he lasted 4 snaps in the NFL last year. This year, obviously, it's a little bit better. But when it's all said and done, for a aging quarterback, it's not probably good enough, but I think there's so many more issues with just finishing games there that I don't know how they get over that hump. Maybe it is Davante Adams.
And where we've seen such a decrease in mobility over the years from Rodgers, we know he's got to stand in the pocket and throw. And if the offensive line can't give him a chance to do that, it doesn't really matter who you have trying to run routes, and if it's Davante Adams, if he can't get the ball off.
Yeah. All right, speaking of dysfunction, the Tennessee Titans. Oh my
Yes,
God.
I see what you did there.
1-4, falling in a heartbreaker to the Indianapolis Colts. What was the final? 20-17.
Yeah.
No,
17.
Yeah.
20-17. Levis went 16 of 27, 95 yards, 1 touchdown. You ladies were at the game. What was kind of the aura at Nissan Stadium on Sunday?
You mentioned Levis's stats, and I was going back and forth about it after the game because they do not look great. They do not stand out. He had another interception. He has yet to have a game without an interception. However, he did not lose that game for them. He did not lose that game for them. Now, he did not win that game for them, right? And a lot of teams in the NFL need their quarterbacks to be that extra guy to step up and actually make that game-winning play, make that move that sets them apart and is the game winner. We know that's not Levis right now. That is far from what Levis is right now. But Coach Callahan and the staff continues to go with him. Circling back to my point, he didn't do enough to be the game-winning guy, but he did not lose that game for them like we could argue some other games this season. There was not enough talent. There was just not enough, period. No one stepped up to win that game. There was not enough plays, big time moments for big time players. Name one veteran that's really stepped up in that game that you could say, yes, he made a difference in that game. I mean, the first person that comes to mind, I don't know. Is technically Pollard. Is Pollard a veteran? This is his first year
in
on
the
team.
NFL. Yeah,
in the NFL, he's a veteran, right? He stepped up. He had a good game, and the running game helped, but it still wasn't enough it wasn't enough to get by to beat a pretty good Colts team with a really good quarterback. And I think that was the big difference between what we saw Sunday versus the Miami game. Titans did enough to win the game. Dolphins were not. They are not the equivalent with the Colts right now. I think there's no question about that looking at the rosters. And the Titans just needed one guy to really step up his game. Maybe not just one game-winning play, but at least a couple on those final drives. They had 2 chances. They had 2 chances to come back after that last touchdown for the Colts. Nothing in those 2 drives. That's my take on it. Levis didn't lose the game, but they do not have anyone on that team right now that's stepping up and making a difference.
They're not finishing games, you guys. I mean, when it comes down to it, you're seeing them come out and maybe have a drive or two during the first half that you're like, oh, maybe that's Will Levis actually getting in a groove, right? And then this kind of, when they hit adversity happens, when they have the Colts take the lead or whatever team take the lead, or they have a turnover happen, it's almost like they can't rise above that and they can't find a way to finish. And I think that's the frustrating part of this team, because you're right, Jill. There's not been a lot of guys offensively or defensively that have been able to step up in those big time moments. And I know Amani Hooker had the interception earlier on, and that's great that they got their first interception of the season, but we needed some things happening in that fourth quarter when it came down to like who was really going to win this game. They could pressure Joe Flacco, the 39-year-old quarterback, but they couldn't sack him. That gives you opportunities to turn over the ball, right? I mean, there's things that could happen with big plays that they're not able to really get done in that fourth quarter. And I think that's what I'm so frustrated about is 20-17, 21-19. It's like these games that are 3 points apart. They should have at least won every game except for that Green Bay game this year when it comes down to it.
Yeah, and I think that the good was good in this game and the bad was just worse. Like, even when the Titans had some opportunities, whether it was in the fourth quarter to come back or really to put the game away, they were, as we heard in the locker room, shooting themselves in the foot. They had 11 penalties for 113 yards, and it was their most penalized game in almost 2 years in terms of penalty yards. And Jill, like, you made a good point about like who was the veteran that stepped up. The first person that came to mind for me was Amani Hooker, and right, he has that great pick. They got points from that
Off of it,
interception
yeah.
on the ensuing drive. But then he had, I think it was the DPI call where like he trucked into the receiver and,
Yep.
Kenneth Murray recovered like what would have been the turnover, but it was negated and there was a flag on the field. And the guys were super frustrated about all those flags. And frankly, I think a lot of those calls, short of like a couple, were the right call. And the Titans just didn't have the discipline to keep themselves in the game or simply keep the Colts from winning the game in key moments.
Yeah, I think that the most troubling thing for me is the way that it seems like the guys in the locker room is kind of falling apart. And it's so crazy because we talked about this, like during training camp, everything was like the vibes are immaculate. Like, oh, this is good. Like we never could dance or feel free at a practice under previous coaches, And so I think to see it specifically, Calvin Ridley expressing his frustration earlier this week and then after the game on Sunday, I think that's one of the things that I'm kind of like, what do you all think?
I'll jump in really quick on that because that's been something that, I've kind of harped on a lot in terms of culture and what is culture in a locker room and what is culture for an organization. I think it can be a little different. Like culture for this organization, they want to get to a winning culture like Green Bay, like the 49ers, right? Like all of the Baltimore Ravens. That's the ultimate goal, I think, for this organization is to have a winning culture. As for a culture within the locker room season to season, I think like that varies sometimes because if you are having, week after week dealing with losses, how do you kind of respect each other, but at the same point have to go out there and rally each other to try to get another win, right? And so you don't want to point the fingers and at each other, whether that be the defense pointing the fingers at the offense or Calvin Ridley pointing the finger at Will Levis. I don't think it's gotten to that point yet. And I think Brian Callahan still in that way has this organization under control. But I can't say I feel safe with saying with 4 more losses and they might lose 2 straight, you guys. They've got the Buffalo Bills and Detroit Lions coming up. I can't say after 2 more straight losses that won't start to begin. I hope it doesn't. But what's the solution for that? I'm not an NFL player. I haven't played or been in the locker room in that capacity. I've been on the flip side as a reporter, and I kind of feel when a locker room can be a little bit divided. But, that's going to be really tough for Brian Callahan this year, you guys. If they do continue to lose, they're going to have to find a way for these young players who are the future of this organization, the Tajay Spears, the J.C. Lathams, the homegrown guys. They're going to have to be the ones who keep everybody grounded because, again, they're the future.
Yeah, and I will say you could feel tension in the locker room even before this week and before the Ridley rant. And unfortunately, the Titans are on national talk shows, but like not for the right reason. When it's all about Calvin Ridley going on, however they worded it in the graphics, rant about needing the football. It just isn't a good look for a team that's already losing. And Ridley has every right to express how he feels and he wants the ball. And Callahan basically said that Monday. Like he needs the ball. He's correct. And he didn't necessarily oppose what Ridley said or the way he said it. And that's the thing. He's justified in saying it, but that still doesn't mean that people who are not around this organization and just catch one clip and one glimpse of what a Titans locker room is aren't going to have a takeaway that, that team is falling apart, right, or they're not united. Because I think that is like the easy takeaway when you're not following this team on a close level. And that's unfortunate because I think this team does have a lot of unity in the locker room and a lot that they can rally around. But the Ridley Levis question and connection has been a topic since July. We've been talking about it, and I feel for them in a sense because they've just been fielding questions for months and months and months, going back to training camp about why, Levis couldn't hit him on a route in camp. So I can definitely understand and empathize with the frustration, but it just seems like they have to find a way to either get on the same page and what the message is going to be, or maybe just internally what the path is forward, because they just need to fix this in some way, shape, or form fast, because it has been snowballing and snowballing since the summer. And now it just feels like that thing is flying downhill and they might not be able to reel it in.
Repair it, yeah.
To piggyback a little bit also on what Lauren said, you made a good point about the national media, or, take it a step further, fans, right? People on social media looking at this Titans locker room, looking at this Titans situation. Very easy to point a finger and say, oh, that culture is not good, or, oh, there clearly something's wrong in that locker room. Especially, right, when Calvin Ridley goes off twice. Once earlier in the week at practice when Paul Kuharsky asked him a question about money, and Calvin Ridley did not like that question very much. That was the first mini little blow up, right? And then again on Sunday after the game, Calvin Ridley was very, very vocal about his displeasure about not getting the football. And like you said, Lauren, he has every right. He's not doing them any favors, because we see those two instances on social media. And it's very easy for people to be like, oh, wow, yes, something's wrong. But my bigger point is that that's not fair. It's not fair, because I actually don't think that this locker room has an issue with culture. I think when I go into that locker room, you know what I think every time? This is a team that's 1-3. This is a team that's 1-4. They are upset because they're losing. I'm sorry, but I would throw my hands up too, and I would, man, when I lost a softball game, and especially if I played a bigger part on that, you did not want to talk to me. My mom would not call me until the next day, and my teammates knew to give me room. I hate losing. Everybody does. And when it's your job to win and you're not doing your job, you have to put yourself in that person's shoes. And unfortunately, we have to approach them in the locker room. And this, how funny, this goes full circle to why we started this podcast in the first place, right? The view of the media, the view of the woman, the view of the athlete, the view of the fans. All of these views are so important. And I think at the end of the day, you got to make sure you're getting the right read and the right view, because I don't think that this is a Titans locker room that has a culture problem. This is a new Titans locker room that is trying to figure it out with new pieces all over the board, including a new young quarterback, including a new head coach. So I am going to give Coach Callahan the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to give that team the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say that is a team that is tired of losing, and they do need to figure it out in order to really turn the ship around. And to your point, Samaria, it's got to be quick.
Yes, and I was going to say that what has to happen for them to be able to do this? I know that Brian Callahan, he held himself accountable. I'm not getting Calvin Ridley the ball. 0 catches, 8 targets. That's pretty tough. I mean, and he also talked about being conservative with Will, because maybe they're scared of what he's going to do. So it's just like, at what point, or what do you all feel like the coaching staff needs to do to kind of right the ship right now?
Well, if you're going to be scared to open up Will Levis, to let Will Levis be Will Levis, then you might as well put Mason Rudolph in, who, by the way, technically Will Levis got him the win, got the Titans the win, because it's statistically under Will Levis, but we all know Mason Rudolph is the one that was in for majority of that game, as Will went out with the shoulder injury. So if they are going to find out everything they know about Will Levis, which that's what Brian Callahan told us 2 weeks ago, and give him every opportunity to continue to be the starter as long as he's healthy, then you kind of got to let Will Levis let it rip a little bit. And you got to let Will Levis, use his legs as much as we kind of all, we kind of curl up when he slides or when he puts his body at risk. That's kind of who Will Levis is. And if you're going to let Will Levis be that guy and find that connection with Calvin Ridley maybe earlier on in the game so they can build upon that, you've got to let him be him. And I think maybe they're not overcoaching. I don't want to say that. It sounds negative, but in a way, maybe trying to shelter him a little too much at this point, that he's in his own head. And I think that again, if you're not going to let Will Levis be Will Levis, and he might lose you games because he throws the ball away, then you might as well turn the offense over to Mason Rudolph, because we know what he is as a quarterback, and that is probably going to be a very conservative game plan where they're going to mainly run the ball and play defense.
Kayla makes a great point. I think he is in his head, and I would believe that if we asked Will Levis that tomorrow, which we could, he would agree to that. I think the question is, how does this team get back to the Will Levis we saw last year? The Will Levis that was slinging it fearlessly downfield, right into the hands of Nick Westbrook-Akine. Oh my God, what a basket catch. And then also fearlessly finding D-Hop on a slant into the end zone. Right. Where is that Levis? What happened to him? And I know I'm not the first person to think of this question. I'm not the first person to ask this question. And I'm pretty sure the Titans coaching staff is already trying to work out the answer to this question. Luckily, that's not my job. It's theirs. But I think trying to get him back to where he was mentally, right? It's not a physically, the shoulder has to get better. He said he wasn't 100% after the game. But I think the real question is, how can we get to that Will Levis mentally where he was last year, fearless?
Jill, I think the mental piece is, it cannot be overstated with Levis. And being around the team, you can see it. And not for nothing, but we're all online, including the players. And I was saying recently to a couple of coworkers, we all know the memes keep piling up. And
they do.
Someone were making a collage of my most shortcoming and embarrassing moments at my job at work. I'd be down bad. And every week they're adding something that I can't imagine what that's like to deal with. And it's kind of like, well, what do you tell the guy? Don't become a meme this week? I mean, he's trying to play football and win games, of course. But I can't imagine what it's like to have something like that in your periphery, going along with the fact that you're not winning football games. And so maybe it is time to introduce some kind of sports psychologist. To this point, when asked, Levis has said that is not something he has pursued yet. But no. I think that could be beneficial, because I think that as much as they tell us, and Levis has said he has to block out the outside noise, I mean, he had to change his phone number. I think the pressure on this young man is immense. And it's affecting his confidence, to Jill's point, and what we saw in his debut last year, 4 touchdowns. And I think it has affected him ever since.
And real quick, Jill, sorry, Samaria, I was just going to say really quick to that point, too, is he didn't, I don't think, feel that pressure last year because he wasn't the starter. No. Ryan Tannehill was the starter. He was named the starter because Ryan Tannehill got hurt, and he was almost like he was playing with none of that in his head, that he was the guy, right?
Yeah. I was going to say, we can't forget that was on his draft report, that he was an emotional player. That is something coming in that teams knew. Maybe that's why they passed up on him.
Good point.
But we do know how good of a player he can be when he doesn't have the pressure. And like Lauren said, it's coming from everywhere. I was going to bring this up. Bleacher Report talking about how it's a Derrick Henry post saying how many rushing yards he leads the league right now in rushing yards with 704. He has 8 touchdowns, and that is more yards than Will Levis has thrown this season. And you keep swiping, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. And Levis is catching strays. And at a certain point, I know that he keeps saying, "I'm not seeing this. I'm not on social media." You have to be seeing it, and it's clearly affecting him. And it's really sad to see. And I think that Buck may have talked about it this week, saying how Levis has regressed this season.
He has.
Yeah, and that's sad.
And he has not yet won a division game, Will Levis. Tannehill won over the Jets at the end of the season. So Will Levis has not yet won an AFC South game, including last year.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at last year because they've only played one division game this year. So you have to take that into account. Samaria, I would suggest let's make sure we get this podcast up and rolling, because who knows, there might be some changes on the horizon. We haven't heard anything yet, but at some point we have to start shifting the conversation to, okay, what's the line? Where does Callahan say, we're going to take some looks somewhere else? But I think this week going into Bills is going to be very interesting. And I would say at 1-4 right now, right, ladies, 1-4.
Yeah.
If you go to 1-5, it'd be really tough to not make some serious decisions, and maybe not just at the quarterback position, maybe some other positions as well. So I would get this podcast up and running.
and talk about too, guys, in eventually in just a couple of weeks, the trade deadline will eventually be coming up in terms of would they maybe possibly trade DeAndre Hopkins? There's teams, Kansas City Chiefs, who need wide receivers right now, and I know that DeAndre Hopkins has been adamant about how he really loves this organization, and I completely agree with him, right? But sometimes it's not his decision, and maybe they are looking towards the future at that point because they feel like they don't have the opportunity to be a playoff team this year. There is a lot more, I think, that, like you said on this podcast, we're going to be able to unfold, because I just think the storylines are just going to keep coming. Hopefully they're better than not, but I don't know.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, it should be fun. No girls allowed.
First and foremost, I think it's awesome that we have the opportunity to get on here, guys, and actually talk about what we see on a daily basis from a different perspective. I love a lot of the media people we work with, a lot of the men too, but I will say that our perspective is sometimes different. And so I think this will be a fun way for people, if they want a different perspective on things, to come in and get their Titans news, or get, their Middle Tennessee sports news, or just news in general that's going around sports. So.
Yeah, and we can definitely talk about relationships in this business, and even Love is Blind. I know we probably will talk about that next week.
We all got our fixes, right?
I love reality television, and I think there's a lot of overlap with sports. Like even the Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers thing, and how that all unfolds, and like the behind the scenes drama that of course we can only speculate on. But I think that part of sports and the intricacies of relationships and like tweets, or one player's history with another in matchups, I think that's what makes sports a lot of fun, and what makes it so engaging for people on an endless loop. And that said, I think we all do have an endless loop of national news right at our fingertips, and I think that there's certainly grounds for a more localized version of Middle Tennessee and national sports, because there are a ton of people who are super passionate in this area about a lot of teams.
Yeah.
I'm excited as well. I've always loved working with you guys. I've always loved covering this market. I've always loved Nashville. I'd love to incorporate some sort of Nashville happy hour segment, which our favorite date spots, our favorite happy hour spots. I'd love to work that in there somehow, because work-life balance is something we're always trying to incorporate. Easier said than done. But I'm just excited to hop on as often as possible and talk everything with you guys.
Well, thank you all so much for watching our very first episode of No Girls Allowed. You got to tune in. We'll keep you updated on when we're going to post and all of those things.
Yay! Woo.